Imagine being so rich, so powerful, that you think you can say anything no matter how racist and get away with it. But what happens when a billionaire woman insults a black judge in court? What happened next shocked the world. This is the story of a woman who thought her money could shield her from the law. A billionaire who thought her privilege would protect her, until one day, she made a racist comment in a courtroom that no one could ignore. What she didn't realize, the consequences would be bigger than she ever imagined. Today, we're diving into how this wealthy woman, full of arrogance and entitlement, crossed a line that would change everything. The courts, the police, and even the public took action, and it all started with a single racist insult. Buckle up, because what happened next is a shock to the system. When you're rich, you think the world works for you. But this woman? She thought she could literally get away with anything. Money had always been her shield, her golden ticket to bypass the rules everyone else had to follow. She didn't care about what people thought. Why would she? She was a billionaire. Who could possibly touch her? But then, she made a colossal mistake. One of those moments where your words make you wish you could rewind time, but there's no going back. She insulted a black judge in front of a whole courtroom, and not just any insult, she targeted his skin color. She made it clear, without a hint of remorse, that she thought he was inferior to her. And the thing is, that wasn't the problem. The problem wasn't even her racist comment. No, the real issue was her belief that nothing would happen to her because of it. The arrogance she had was unreal. In her eyes, she wasn't just above everyone else in the room, she was above the entire justice system. She thought she could say whatever she wanted because, well, she was rich. What was a simple racist remark compared to her wealth, right? But here's the thing. The courtroom isn't a place where you can buy respect. There's no amount of money that will protect you from the consequences of being a terrible human being. And the system, well, it was about to show her just how wrong she was. The problem here wasn't just that she was racist. It was the fact that she thought she could get away with it. And this wasn't some random, off-the-cuff comment either. No, she said it in front of everyone: lawyers, witnesses, court staff, all of them witnessing her behavior. This wasn't a mistake or a slip-up. She was making a bold statement that people like her, people with wealth and privilege, could do whatever they wanted, and the world would just let it slide. But this was different. This time, it wasn't going to slide. This time, the problem was going to be bigger than she ever imagined. She had just disrespected the one institution that was designed to hold people like her accountable to the law. And it wasn't just an attack on the judge. It was an attack on the entire system that exists to protect people from exactly what she was doing. Now, think about it. In the past, how many people in positions of power have said things like this, done things like this, and gotten away with it because they could just throw money at the problem? How many times has someone with extreme wealth gotten a pass simply because they have the resources to manipulate the situation to their favor? But this time, there was a judge, a black man, who wasn't going to let it go. Here's where the challenge starts. The system was being put to the test. This wasn't just about one racist comment in a private setting. This was about what happens when you try to humiliate someone in public, in a place where justice is supposed to be blind to things like wealth, power, and race. The question was clear. Would the system stand up and say, "Enough"? Or would this woman's wealth shield her from the consequences of her actions? The real challenge was this. Did she really think that in 2025, this kind of behavior would go unpunished? That she could say something like that and just walk away? The system was about to send a loud and clear message to people like her who thought money could cover up every mistake. This time, it's different. But beyond the specifics of this situation, there's a much bigger problem at play here. This woman's racist comment wasn't just a personal attack on one judge It was a reflection of a much deeper issue. It's the way wealth and privilege allow people to ignore the humanity of others. When you're at the top, when you have everything you could ever want, it's easy to forget that your money doesn't give you the right to treat people however you please. It's easy to slip into the mindset that people are beneath you. And that's the core problem here. Her belief that her wealth made her untouchable. It's that same attitude that fuels inequality and racism when powerful people use their status to dehumanize others. When they think they can say whatever they want, treat people however they want, and get away with it because they have the means to do so. The challenge isn't just about this one incident. The challenge is much bigger. It's about the attitude that wealth equals immunity. It's about how many people, especially those with extreme privilege, believe that their actions won't have consequences. It's about how far some people will go to make sure that no matter what they do, the world will never hold them accountable. And that's what makes this situation so much more significant. It wasn't just about the woman's insult. It was about the system standing up and saying, "This will not stand." At the heart of the issue was the question of equality. The system's failure to punish racism and discrimination when it comes from the rich and powerful has been a major problem for a long time. The real challenge here was whether the system could finally prove that no one, no matter how much money they have, is above the law. The woman thought she could get away with this because she had money. She thought that wealth would protect her from the consequences of her actions. But now, she was about to find out that she was wrong. This is where things really start to spiral out of control for her. At first, she probably thought it would all blow over. Maybe she'd even get a slap on the wrist. After all, that's how it usually goes for people like her, right? Say something stupid, apologize, and move on with your life. But this time, she was dead wrong. The moment the words left her mouth, she couldn't take them back. She insulted the judge, not just a random judge, but a black man in a position of power. She thought her money could buy her freedom from the consequences. But there's one thing she didn't account for. This wasn't a private conversation. This wasn't some careless comment made in a social setting. This was in the courtroom, a space where the law is supposed to reign supreme and where there's no place for ignorance or hate. Her arrogance didn't stop there. After making the comment, she probably expected a quick apology and some smooth talking to brush it off. But that wasn't going to happen. This wasn't a situation where a simple sorry would fix everything. The damage was done. The judge wasn't going to ignore it. And now, the court wasn't just dealing with a rude comment, it was dealing with an act of blatant racism, a challenge to the very foundation of what the courtroom represents. This wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was about the potential for the system itself to be corrupted if this behavior went unpunished. But here's where things start to take a real turn. People were watching. Not just the courtroom, but the world. The news media, the public, social media, it was all over the place. The more they heard, the angrier they got. This wasn't just another rich person getting away with things. This was someone with enough power and money to think she could walk all over others. And for once, people weren't standing for it. The outrage was growing, and it wasn't going away. Now, the question wasn't just whether the woman would be held accountable. It was how far this would go. Could she actually be held to the same standards as everyone else? Could she face the consequences of her actions, or would her money and status save her once again? And it wasn't just the media that was buzzing. Inside the courtroom, things weren't as simple as they seemed. The judge, for one, wasn't going to let this slide. He had to decide what happened next. Did he give her the benefit of the doubt, or did he stick to the law and prove that no one is above it? The challenge for the judge was huge. He had to balance upholding the law with making sure that something like this didn't happen again. He couldn't just let her walk away from this unscathed. It wasn't just about her comment. It was about sending a message that this kind of behavior wasn't acceptable. The stakes were high for him, too. Meanwhile, the public wasn't just waiting for the legal system to act. They were also pushing for something more. They wanted to see change. This wasn't just about one woman's actions. It was about everyone who's ever felt the sting of discrimination, everyone who's ever been marginalized. It was a test of whether society would finally start taking these issues seriously, whether people in power would finally be forced to answer for their racism. Would this woman face real consequences? Or would this be another example of how money and privilege allow you to avoid the fallout from your actions? But the bigger question wasn't just about this woman, or even the judge. It was about the system itself. The law is supposed to be blind to race, gender, and wealth. But how many times have we seen wealthy people get away with things that the average person never could? How many times have we seen racism go unchallenged because the people in power refuse to hold themselves accountable? This wasn't just about one woman's comment, it was about whether the law would stand up to the corruption that allows people like her to do whatever they want, without fear of real punishment. As the case developed, the media played a huge role in keeping the pressure on. They weren't going to let this fade into the background. People were demanding answers. They were demanding justice. For once, this wasn't just a small story, it was a turning point. The challenge for the system was huge. If they let this go unpunished, if they allowed her to just apologize and move on, it would send a message that nothing really changes. That the rich, the powerful, and the privileged can do whatever they want and still walk away without consequences. But if they held her accountable, if they treated her like any other person, it could be a sign that the system was finally starting to work the way it was supposed to. Her world was falling apart. The more she tried to cover up her actions, the worse things got. She thought her money could protect her, but now she was seeing how it couldn't shield her from the court of public opinion. People weren't just mad at her. They were mad at the system that allowed her to think she could get away with this. And the longer she tried to play the "I'm sorry, let's move on" card, the more it became clear that no one was going to let this go. Now, the challenge had become bigger than just her. It was a test for the whole system. Would this case show that no one, no matter how much money they have, could escape the consequences of their actions? Or would it be just another example of how the rich can get away with whatever they want? The public was waiting. The courtroom was waiting. And most importantly, the judge was waiting for his moment to decide whether justice would truly be blind or whether it would be influenced by the weight of a billionaire's wallet. This is the moment everything changes. The tension that's been building up for weeks reaches its peak. The woman, who thought she could get away with it, who assumed her wealth and status could shield her from the consequences of her actions, is about to get the shock of her life. The court case isn't just about her racist comment anymore. It's about whether the system will stand up to her or crumble under the weight of her privilege. And what happens next? Well, it's a moment no one could have predicted. The courtroom falls silent. The judge stands up, and for the first time in this whole mess, it's clear that he's not going to let her off the hook. The woman might have expected him to back down, maybe even make excuses for her behavior, but she couldn't have been more wrong. This time, there's no room for apologies. No amount of money will change the fact that she crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. The judge's decision is the turning point. His ruling won't just decide her fate, it will send a message to the world about accountability, privilege, and racism. He looks down at her, eyes cold and unmoving. The woman knows it's over. Her wealth, her power, her influence, they all mean nothing now. The judgment that's about to come down is about the law, about what's right, not who you are or how much you can pay to make things disappear. The world's watching, waiting for justice to be done. Then it happens. The judge's words are like a thunderclap in the room. He delivers the verdict with no hesitation. He calls out her actions for what they are: vile, discriminatory, and inexcusable. He makes it clear that no one, no matter how much money they have, will ever be allowed to insult another person like this and walk away without facing real consequences. Her wealth hasn't saved her, and now she's facing the consequences that she never thought were possible. This is the moment that defines everything. It's not just about the woman anymore, it's about the system. The court has made its statement. It has stood up for justice, for dignity, and for the people who don't have the luxury of buying their way out of trouble. This ruling isn't just about the punishment she faces, it's a symbolic win for every person who's ever been mistreated, for every person who's ever been the target of someone else's hate. This is about equality. It's about saying that no one is above the law. But even then, it's not over. The woman doesn't just accept her fate and quietly leave the courtroom. No, she tries to fight back, trying to find any way to wiggle out of the consequences. She appeals to her wealth, tries to use her connections, but it's clear now that she's losing the battle. Her tactics don't work this time. The judge's decision stands, and the punishment will be severe. The media goes wild. News outlets report her downfall. The public celebrates. They see this as a win, not just for the justice system, but for society. It's the victory they've been waiting for, a sign that maybe, just maybe, the rich and powerful can't escape their actions any longer. It's a turning point for everyone who's been oppressed, belittled, or looked down upon by the rich and powerful. It's a message that racism and discrimination won't be tolerated, no matter who you are. But the woman? She's left stunned, alone in the wreckage of her own making. She thought she could hide behind her wealth forever. She thought she could say anything and never face the consequences. But she learned the hard way that money doesn't solve everything. The system, flawed as it may be, has shown that there's still room for justice in this world. The case has sparked conversations across the globe about power, privilege, and accountability, and it's clear that things are starting to change. This moment, it's bigger than just this woman. It's about the power of the law, the power of people standing up to those who abuse their privilege, and the idea that no one is untouchable. The shockwave from this ruling ripples through society, and it becomes clear that this is a victory not just for the judge, not just for the people affected by her words, but for every single person who's ever felt like they didn't matter, like they were powerless in a world of wealth and privilege. The key movement here is the shift in power the moment the woman realizes that she can't escape. It's a shift that brings justice back to the forefront and pushes back against the toxic mentality that wealth can buy freedom from consequence. Her downfall marks the beginning of a new era, one where people start to realize that actions have consequences, no matter who you are. It's a turning point, not just in this case, but for the future. And in the end, the woman's empire of wealth and influence crumbles, a stark reminder to the world that no one, no matter how rich, no matter how powerful, is above the law. So, what's the real takeaway from all of this? The woman thought she could buy her way out of anything, that her status could shield her from facing the consequences of her actions. But she learned the hard way that no amount of money or power can protect you from the truth. When you cross a line, when you make a blatant racist comment in a public place, there's no hiding from it. The judge didn't back down. The court didn't let her slip away with a simple apology. They held her accountable, and the world watched as a powerful message was sent. Racism and hate will not be tolerated. It's a victory for justice, for the people, and for anyone who's ever been marginalized or oppressed by the rich and powerful. Her downfall didn't just show her the limits of her wealth, it showed the world that no one is above the law. So, what's next? The system has been tested, and for once, it didn't fail. Maybe, just maybe, this is the start of something bigger, a real shift where people can no longer get away with discrimination, no matter how much money they have. It's clear things are changing. If you think justice is finally catching up with the rich and powerful, subscribe for more. This is not a real story. It's a fictional story.